Before I start the video, I have to mention the fact that I had some orthodontics work done, so I'll probably sound a bit different to how I did in my last video. If you're watching this video, I'm sure you've heard of the mob votes before. Whether you love them or hate them, they will probably continue happening in some form or another. So I've decided to make this video going over all the previous candidates and ranking them. This ranking is based purely on in-game usage, so personal preference in design and most speculation will not factor into the ranking. However, I will still briefly discuss both of these during some of the mob sections. Finally, before starting the ranking, I'd like to remind you to like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. With that out of the way, let's get ranking. Mob C, the Great Hunger, is the worst of the original mob vote candidates in my eyes, and to be honest with you, it really isn't close. I believe this mob spawns in deserts, although I don't remember where I heard this, so take it with a grain of salt, where it will hide in the ground. This sounds incredibly annoying. Imagine wandering through the desert only to be ambushed out of nowhere. It gets worse though, because this mob has the ability to disenchant items. Not only do we already have this in modern versions of the game in the form of the grindstone, but if I'm understanding correctly, this enchantment removal will probably apply while you're wearing/using said enchanted tools and armor. Imagine losing all your hard-earned enchants to whatever this thing is. Yeah, no thanks. To many people, the Sniffer was a disappointment. I am one of those people. When the Sniffer was announced, the info we had on it was that it hatched from eggs found in the ocean and it could dig up plants. Now, to be fair to the devs, they did say that these plants would be decorative, but still, most blocks in the game, particularly non-full blocks such as plants, have some kind of secondary or even tertiary use, and to get 2 plants, the bare minimum, which didn't even have a single use, was a bit disappointing. Even the decorated pots, which are also extremely explicitly supposed to be for decoration, have a use. And as many people have pointed out before, most features in the game have around 2 uses and or connect with other features in the game. But when it comes to the Sniffer plants, they just seem really out of place. It doesn't help that you have to really go out of your way to get the Sniffer, or that the Sniffer takes an excruciating amount of time to dig up seeds. Ultimately, the Sniffer could have been so easily much more than it is. That's why it's so low on the ranking. The next mob vote candidate is Mob A, otherwise known as the Barnacle. I like this mob's design decently enough, but in terms of gameplay, well, as we've seen, it could be worse. The Barnacle's main gimmick is that it spawns in deep waters and pulls you down to drown you. First of all, the fact that it spawns in deep oceans is pretty cool. Right now, deep oceans don't really have much of an identity of their own. The only thing they have going for them is ocean monuments, which only affects a small part of the deep oceans they're present in. Other than spawning in deep oceans though, the Barnacle doesn't seem like the kind of mob I would like to have in the game. There are already risks to crossing an ocean in the form of the Drownwood Tridents and bubble columns. I don't think we really need many more. In terms of speculation, I think there's an almost 100% chance that the Barnacle would have a drop, since the Phantoms also ended up having a drop. Whether this drop would be useful and or fun though, we don't know since the Barnacle didn't win its mob vote. Apart from all that, there really isn't too much we know about this mob, so I think it's time we moved on to the next one. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think the Tough Golem ever stood a chance, which is kind of sad because as a standalone feature it was an interesting concept. The idea of a mob that can display items is interesting, even if it's not very useful, and the fact that they can be dyed and are another golem mob is cool as well. But ultimately, when compared to the other 2 mobs from its mob vote, the Tough Golem isn't really able to stand up for itself. There just isn't enough actual function going for the Tough Golem to make it useful. And this doesn't mean it necessarily has to conjure up an item. There are plenty of ways for mobs to be useful without items. For example, if the Tough Golem could only store items from its creator and would alert any Iron Golems nearby that it had been attacked, that could potentially be an interesting niche for the Tough Golem to fill. Ah yes, Mob B, otherwise known as the Phantom. Infamous for being the first of many regrettable mob vote winners. But all in all, was it really that bad? The Phantom spawns high in the sky when players haven't slept for more than 3 days, which is probably too short of a time frame. The Phantom also has a strange hitbox, meaning it's very hard to hit a Phantom without it hitting you as well. Because of these two things, the Phantom is usually considered the most annoying mob in the game. So you may be confused as to why I'm ranking it above some of the other candidates. Well, put simply, the Phantom has a use, and a decent one at that. The Phantom drops its membrane, which allows you to fix your elytra before getting mending on it, and more importantly, can be used to make slow falling potions. These potions are really fun to use and can help immensely with the Ender Dragon fight in case you're having trouble. Also, the fact that they are entirely avoidable via sleeping decreases how annoying they are for me. I'd rather have them only spawn after a few nights without sleep than every single night. The Glare is a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, it could potentially help Bedrock players light up their builds. It also would have apparently come with a new light source, although the devs didn't actually say that until it was too late. On the other hand though, the Glare would have almost no effect on Java players due to the F3 button, and although a new light source would be cool, it doesn't really have much of an effect on the game. The Glare would probably have spawned in lush caves, judging by its design, but I don't believe that was ever explicitly stated. However, if that were to be the case, it would be quite cool. Considering the nature of the lush caves, it's a bit strange that there are only 2 mobs in it and only one of them is unique. Overall, I'd say the Glare is an alright mob by itself, but when put in the context of the other mob vote candidates, particularly the other 2021 candidates, it just doesn't shine as bright as the rest. Next up, we have the Moobloom. You may be surprised to see it so high up, but a lot of people give this mob unnecessary hate. While yes, it may at first seem relatively boring, it actually has a decent amount going for it. For starters, it spawns in the Flower Forest. At the moment, the Flower Forest only has some extra flowers and extra bees going for it, so a new mob is a welcome addition. Apart from that, we don't know much. The developers were very vague about what the Moobloom could do, although apparently they would have some kind of interaction with bees. Bees are in my opinion one of the best implemented mobs in the game, so adding an interaction between the two could result in the Moobloom being useful as well. If the Moobloom would have been anything like how it was in Minecraft Earth, then we can also assume it would feature a new flower, the Buttercup. Of course, that doesn't count for much. If it did, then the Sniffer would probably be higher up on the list than it is. But what can you do? If you are a Copper Golem voter, I don't think you're going to enjoy this one. I've seen people call the Copper Golem the holy grail of Minecraft before, and to be honest, I think that's a massive exaggeration. The Copper Golem has a few mechanics. Firstly, it is made of copper and can randomly press the copper buttons that it would come with. Apart from simply being made out of copper, which is cool and all, it really isn't as useful as you think. Randomization is already possible in Redstone via mobs on pressure plates, among other things, and because the Copper Golem's second mechanic, that being freezing up over time, I don't see this being particularly useful. But if you really disagree, you can always comment what you think I missed down below. The Glow Squid has a bit of a bad rep, but to be honest, I don't think it's entirely deserved. While yes, there may have been some influence on its win chance by content creators, particularly Dream, it actually doesn't feel as unnecessary as some of the other mob vote winners. To begin with, you can actually find it relatively commonly. A lot of mob vote candidates have the problem of being incredibly specific encounters, like the Allay and the Sniffer. And the second thing the Glow Squid does right, is that it actually has a widely usable drop. Glow ink sacks are very useful for building and making a base feel cozier. Plus, I can definitely see the Glow ink sack getting at least one extra use in the future. Yes, the Glow Squid may not technically give off light, but in my opinion it's still a pretty decent mob. When it came time for the 2021 mob vote, I personally voted for the Allay. And while I wouldn't say I regret it, given some of the candidates from other years, I wouldn't say it's exactly the best mob. Probably the main reason it's not that high up in the ranking is because it's a pretty uncommon find. You can only get it through woodland mansions and pillager outposts. That's not entirely a bad thing, and it makes thematic sense considering the Allay's implied relation to the Vex, but it means that many players won't ever encounter Allays in the first place. In terms of use though, the Allay is very unique. First of all, it can pick up and hold up to a stack of any item you give it. This includes usually unstackable items, meaning players who are knowledgeable in Redstone can use them for unstackable storage systems, item sorters, and other contraptions. Allays will spit items out either at the player or at a note block. Unfortunately, for the general Minecraft player, this is not too useful, but it means the Allay does definitely still have a use. In order to get more allays, you have to duplicate them at a jukebox using amethyst shards. It's strange, but it works in my opinion. So yeah, the allay is a pretty decent mob, but if you aren't super invested in the game, you probably aren't likely to encounter or use it. The Rascal kind of has the opposite story to the Sniffer. When it came time to vote, it seemed like it would be useless. This idea probably wasn't helped by the fact that Mojang only showed off an enchanted iron pickaxe and shovel being given out by the Rascal. But ultimately, I think the Rascal would have ended up being a better feature than the Sniffer. Firstly, it would spawn in abandoned mineshafts. Not only are abandoned mineshafts relatively common, but they're also one of the few structures that have been given very little in terms of unique features. It is also likely that the Rascal would have ended up getting a better loot table at some point depending on player feedback. It also almost certainly would have come with at least one truly unique item to pique players' interest. All in all, I think looking back on the 2022 mob vote, the Rascal was definitely the best choice, even if it's a little underwhelming compared to the other mobs on this list. It's very hard to rank the Isolager, or Chillager as it was originally known. On one hand, it expands the Illager family and provides some unique challenges and content to the mountain surface. On the other hand, we have no idea whether it will be annoying or not. If it has a slightly more common spawn chance than the Witch, maybe similar to the Enderman, I think it would be fine, without making it a complete non-issue. But considering its attack that likely gives you slowness and seems quite hard to dodge, if it spawns very frequently, I can definitely see it becoming about as annoying as the Phantom. It does seem like it would be quite a good addition though, and getting a new hostile mob would be a very well needed break from the amount of passive mobs being added nowadays. And like with other hostile mobs, it would most likely come with some kind of drop. Before the 2023 mob vote, penguins were one of the most recommended mobs to be added in Minecraft, and the mob vote candidate version of the penguin really wasn't a disappointment. Spawning in Stony Shores is cool. There really isn't any unique content there at the moment, so I was happy when the devs said that's where its spawn location was. Being able to increase the speed of boats is also great. Call me a contrarian, but to be honest, I think speeding up boats might be more useful than wolf armor. Of course, neither of them come close to extra reach, but I digress. Ultimately, I think the penguin is a great mob. Just a shame that it was in a mob vote with some of the other best mob vote candidates. Mob D, the Wildfire, is definitely the best of the original 4 mob vote candidates. I love this guy for multiple reasons, some of which I've mentioned in my video about Minecraft Dungeons features being added to the base game, which you should check out after you're done watching this video. This mob is essentially a stronger blaze that spawns in nether fortresses, as you would expect. Before we even get into the mob itself, this is already great. The nether fortresses were one of the few parts of the nether that remained untouched during the development of the nether update. If the Wildfire were to be added, it would give the last remaining piece of the old nether a well-deserved update and finally make the nether feel whole. Apparently, and I don't know how I can verify this claim, the Wildfire was actually going to be in the nether update but was scrapped due to time issues. And yes, I know about the rib armor trim, but armor trims are found all over the place. The Wildfire would be unique to the nether fortress. If the Wildfire is anything like its Minecraft dungeon self, then it will most likely be invulnerable until you destroy its shields. This would lead to a challenging but fun, and most importantly avoidable fight. And finally, in a similar vein to the other mobs from the first mob vote, the Wildfire would most likely end up having a drop, possibly its crown, one of its shields, or the large blaze rod in the center of its body. The Armadillo is definitely not a bad mob, considering it's second on the list. It's quite good actually. If it was a candidate in just about any other mob vote, I would have absolutely voted for it. But unfortunately, the Armadillo was part of the same mob vote as the Crab, one of the best mob vote candidates of all time. It spawns in the Badlands and Savannas, which I'm quite happy about. In its current state, the Armadillo blocks all damage from weak attacks and some damage from stronger attacks when rolled up. It scares away spiders when not rolled up and can be brushed to get Armadillo scutes. Armadillo scutes can be used to craft and repair wolf armor, which can negate all damage done to a wolf until the armor breaks. I see the appeal of these features, although I personally don't use dogs in combat or for anything really. All of these things make the Armadillo really solid. However, if I'm being honest with you, it still doesn't hold a candle to the Crab. Ah, the Crab. I'm an avid crab supporter. When the crab lost, it was the first time I actually felt something during a mob vote. Yes, even the glow squid, who most were upset about when it won its vote, was not that big of a deal to me. But losing the crab was something else. So as you'd probably expect, I have a lot to say about it. First of all, like with most candidates, I'm gonna go over its spawning. The crab would spawn in mangrove swamps, which is great since mangrove swamps are new and often Mojang doesn't return to features for a very long time, so seeing it get some love was a really good thing in my eyes. You may not realize it at first, but every feature currently found in the mangrove swamps, including the new bogged, can be gotten elsewhere. While this is great for many challenges where mangrove swamps may not be a thing, it makes the mangroves as a whole feel a bit like an unnecessary addition in vanilla survival. So the addition of something unique is very welcome. The crab as a mob is also very cute and I could see it having a lot of charisma in game, although this fact isn't really a factor in my ranking. The main thing about the crab is its crab claw. When I have discussions about it with people online, I feel like they don't really understand the scale of the crab claw's use. First of all, wolves and boats, the main things impacted by the other two mobs from this vote, are not nearly as widespread as placing blocks. I mean, it's literally half the game. Minecraft. Second of all, the utility of the crab claw is not for people who are too lazy to walk a couple blocks or pillar up a couple blocks. If you think that, you need to expand your scope a bit. Yes, a single use of the crab claw may save a second, but in a large build, with the crab claw being used over and over again, it's going to save you dozens of minutes or hours if the build is really big. And as anyone who has built large scale knows, every minute counts. If I wanted to go even further in depth with the crab, I could, but this section is already way longer than the rest. So if you want me to make a whole other video going over the insane possibilities of the crab claw, be sure to tell me in the comments section. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. This was a really fun video to make, and although I don't plan on making too many more ranking videos, I have planned a couple down the line. So if you enjoyed this one, be sure to like this video so more people can see it and subscribe so you can catch the next ranking videos. And with that out of the way, I hope to see you next time. Bye.